Hey everybody, I hope you're doing well this week. It's Lynn Hayes, and I'm here to talk a little bit about the astrological influences that are coming up for this week. I did a little video the other day about the large number of retrograde planets that are coming up over the next 6-7 months or so. I'll put a link to that in the description box. I also wanted to mention I send out a monthly report. I've done this report for close to 30 years now. Every single month, it's about where the planets are going, the kind of personal impact that we might see from those. So I'll put a link for the sign up in the description box also, so you can make sure that you get that on the first of every month. So let's talk a little bit about this week, and if you are behind and haven't seen these videos before, you might want to watch the last couple. I try to keep them pretty short. And actually, some exciting news for some of my people that don't like YouTube. There's a new service called Otter that will transcribe the audio files. So I'll be able to link those on the blog. So if you don't like watching the videos, check the links in the blog that I'll publish with the video. So let's talk about what's happening this week. Mercury, the planet of the mind and communication, is moving into Taurus. Mercury has been in the sign of Aries for the last few weeks. Aries is a fire sign. It's very, it can be sort of opinionated when Mercury is there. We can be more fiery in our expressions. There can be more anger, and we can be quicker to sort of inflame situations. Mercury is moving into Taurus today. At the time I filmed this, it hasn't quite entered that sign yet. But for the next few weeks with Mercury in Taurus, life will be a little calmer in terms of our communication, the way that we are interacting with others, the way we're sharing ideas, and that should calm down communication quite a bit. It'll also, because Taurus is the sign that really craves equanimity and peace and security. When Mercury's in Taurus, it helps us to find ways more easily that will help us to find that sense of inner peace. It'll also help us to discover ways that we ourselves can feel more secure and more grounded in the earthly things. So that's going to really help. Now, when Mercury first moves into Taurus, it's going to form a challenging square to Saturn. Saturn has recently moved into Aquarius. Saturn is the planet of restriction, hard work, limitations, challenges, but it's also the planet of material success. Saturn wants us to master the material world. So it's a great boon. And when Saturn is in Aquarius, there can be some restrictions on our freedom. Aquarius is the sign of freedom and innovation and scientific discoveries. And it also has a lot to do with technology. And I'm finding it interesting that as soon as Saturn went into Aquarius, there was a lot of talk of contact tracing because of the virus, and, sort of tracing everybody's movements, which is kind of big brother-ish, which is one thing that Saturn and Aquarius deals with. So I'll put a link to my Saturn and Aquarius article in case you're interested in exploring that a little bit more. But when Mercury squares Saturn, it's only going to last for a day or two, but that can create some challenges with communications. We might feel like we're misunderstood, and this is happening over the next few days. So April 27th, April 28th, possibly. It may be more difficult to feel that you've really gotten your message across with Mercury square Saturn. And then around the 29th and the 30th, Mercury lines up with Uranus. Uranus, the planet of innovation, radical behavior. And so after this restriction of Saturn, there could be a little bit of an explosion on the 29th and the 30th. So those would not be really good days for important meetings or important conversations about things that are somewhat challenging or emotional, especially because the Black Moon Lilith, which is a sort of a fictitious body that does seem to have quite a bit of impact and has to do with some moral outrage and some, anywhere that we have rage and anger that's sort of lurking in our psyche that's buried, the Black Moon Lilith is usually to be found. So the 29th and 30th could be a little rocky. Those are good days to kind of retreat and find a peaceful place to sort of regain balance. On the positive side, though, when Mercury conjoins or aligns with Uranus, there can be a lot of intuitive insight. There can be some exciting new ideas for change. So there can be some awakenings that happen. We may find that it's difficult to sleep because our minds are running wild at that time. So just sort of be prepared for this. Also, an asteroid, Pallas Athena. I don't talk about the asteroids much in this sort of environment because they move pretty quickly. I think of them more as storytellers than of real drivers of change. But when one of the asteroids changes signs, there's a little bit of a shift. So Pallas Athena is the asteroid that has to do with divine wisdom and divine intelligence. I think of Pallas as being first of all, so she's the goddess that was born out of Zeus's head. So there's some symbolism of this knowledge that just kind of appears from the gods. And so I feel like Pallas has a lot to do with insight and the kind of channeled wisdom that comes through our higher self, through our guardian spirits, however we want to frame that. So when Pallas moves into Aquarius, which is a sign that is very much associated with this sort of energy, with new ideas and all kinds of innovation and technological wizardry and sort of separating from the past and doing things that are completely new. This is, so Pallas will be in Aquarius for about a little less than a year. So this is likely going to be a time when there are a lot of scientific discoveries and innovations in healthcare, which is really good news considering the situation that we find ourselves in right now with a pandemic and a virus going wild with no vaccine and no treatment, really. So I think Pallas and Aquarius will really help that. The only other thing, the last thing that I want to talk about is, and this will have its own video sometime, hopefully this week. So just to recap, back in January, Saturn and Pluto aligned in the sky. They came really close last spring and summer, within 3 degrees, but they didn't align exactly until January. And it was January 10th, actually, which is a very significant date in the history of the global pandemic. That's when things started to explode internationally. So then we had Jupiter conjoin Pluto a few weeks ago. Jupiter and Pluto are going to be within a degree or two of each other pretty much all summer. And Mars is going to be tracking in there too. So I have a little video that I created that shows how all of that's going to work. But when Jupiter and Pluto get together, Jupiter is the planet that reveals our search for meaning in life. Jupiter has to do with religion and philosophy and theology, and it also has to do with the things that give our life meaning. So anything that helps us to feel optimistic and confident is under the realm of Jupiter. And Jupiter also is expansive and really wants a bigger life. When Jupiter and Pluto collided a few weeks ago, that's when we started to see all these demonstrations. We're sick of staying at home. We want to be out in the world. There are things that are happening out there. And, Jupiter and Pluto are going to be within a few degrees of each other for months. So this sort of resistance to oppression is going to be pretty significant. And then Mars, which is going to retrograde in September, Mars is going to be kind of tied in with that too. So I'll certainly be talking much more about that. But for our purposes for this week, Pluto turned retrograde a few days ago, I think the 25th. And Pluto is pretty much, from our perspective on Earth, as we observe the heavens, Pluto is pretty much at a standstill. It's just standing up there in the sky, beaming its light of intensity, transformation, destruction, rebirth. And we are, as a global people, really being called on to let go of a lot of things in our life that maybe really didn't have deep meaning. And maybe they did have deep meaning. But whenever Pluto's involved, there's no option. You basically have to let go of those things. And we do. We don't have any option in this case. And unlike when we have individual transits of Pluto in our chart, we may be the only one having those experiences. But right now, the whole world is there together, for better or for worse. So this is going to be an interesting time that's coming up. I write an inspiration post on my blog every Sunday, and I really like the one that I posted yesterday. So I'm also going to put a link to that in the description box. If you're feeling hemmed in, if you're feeling, if you're screaming to the sky, why is this happening? I think you'll find that interesting and useful and helpful. So that is all I have to say for this week. If you have questions or anything you'd like me to cover, please let me know in the description box. I really appreciate your coming along with me for the ride. If you haven't already, please subscribe. After you subscribe, there's a little bell you can click and be notified of future posts. So again, thanks so much, and I'll see you next week.